Welcome to Divorce Dialogues. I'm Catherine Miller. Divorce Dialogues brings expert guests to the airwaves to talk through your divorce questions and fill in the gray areas about separating. From thinking about divorce to how to behave during divorce to what to do after, this is Divorce Dialogue. Welcome to Divorce Dialogues. I'm Catherine Miller. I'm the founder of the Miller Law Group and a trainer at the Center for Understanding in Conflict, and I am on a mission to change how people divorce and help them divorce with dignity. And my guest today is Vivian Meraki. She's a parenting expert, a best-selling author, and an award-winning speaker, and she spent more than 2 decades helping parents and leaders build secure, lasting connections. She draws from global leadership experience and her own powerful journey of renewal, and she now guides families and professionals in breaking generational cycles and creating lives rooted in presence, resilience, and genuine connection. Welcome, Vivian Meraki. It's a real pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, and I think as I read your bio, I think about parenting and leadership. And really, they're very similar, aren't they?
They are. It's so true.
Yeah, and so since you've worked with parents and other leaders and teams all over the world, what is it that first drew you to focus on that parent-child relationship, especially since this is divorce dialogues in the context of divorce?
Yeah, so I would say that my work actually was born out of my own pain. I went through a divorce, and despite us trying to be amicable, taking time, giving space, and being as mindful as we could, our children, when I moved out of the matrimonial home, they still went through a period of high anxiety. Both of my kids, I have two kids, they're now 10 and 7. And at the time, they had such crippling anxiety that I couldn't even be out of their line of sight. And it made school drop-offs impossible.
Wow.
Yeah, like taking the groceries, or not, sorry, not the groceries, the trash down to the trash bin down the hall, because I moved into an apartment complex, was hard. It was like, everyone get our shoes on, we're doing it together, even though it was just a couple steps. And the transition between homes was really hard. So we signed them up for child therapy, but that was only once a week, 50 minutes a week. And in the end, I leaned into my own practice in as a somatic coach. I work with body, and we'll touch on that later on. But I leaned into my own practices and converting them for children and making them more age appropriate and converting some of them into dialogue and conversations and exercises and practices. And I saw the shift. And when I saw the shift, I felt like this is something that is clearly working for our family. And it's something that I really have a desire to help other families with, that we can, it's not about accelerating, but it's about reducing that suffering, reducing the amount of time that we're spent trying to figure things out, and to bring that empowerment back and stability back into our children's lives. So really that's why I ended up pivoting and why I'm doing this work now.
Yeah, I think that's really touching actually and really impactful. And I just want to go circle back to something you said. It sounded like what you're saying is that you and your former spouse were trying very hard to make a smooth transition for the children and to have it be as amicable and respectful as possible. I'm adding to this. And even so, it was really difficult for your kids. And so, because a lot of people listening to this are like, well, if it was easy, right, then easy. Divorce is never easy, but my situation is really tough. And so, how can the lessons that Vivian bring to the party really help me? And I think I'm really interested in talking a little bit about what you mean when you're talking about like the somatic treatment and how that can really help.
Hmm. So the way I describe somatics is actually the root. I use the root word. So the root word of somatics is soma, and soma is Greek for. Oh, sorry, I just got tripped up on my words. My tongue is moving faster than my mouth. But soma is the aliveness in a living organism. And so when we tap into what's within us, and we as people, somatics is a practice that recognizes and studies how to bring about that aliveness back through the body. We're all living. And the somatic practice, I think, at the heart of it, it's understanding the way that we're wired. We're all human. We all have a nervous system. And the way that we typically think about a nervous system is, oh, well, a nervous system, that's fight or flight in a stress response. But what we often don't think about is the other side. We're also wired to thrive. We're wired to create and to connect. but we just don't understand how our nervous system works and how to transition from that fight or flight into that space where we can connect and create, which frankly, from my perspective and in the work that I do, that's where we find purpose. That's where we find satisfaction and fulfillment and joy. And as a somatic practice, even in these really difficult moments like divorce, grief, and loss, which is what's going on, how do we help support our nervous system so that we can tap into the other side of what it's there for, which is to help us to create and connect with other people and things that we really care about?
Yeah, I love that because it so gets you out of or your head. I mean, of course, this is happening a lot in your head, and the idea that I'm feeling anxious because I'm in a scary situation, rather than saying, "Listen, I could calm my body, and in calming my body, also calm my mind."
That's right. Yes, the body notices before the mind. And the way that we're wired is that 80 to 90% of our nervous system is wired from body to brain, especially in stress response. So, the part of the nervous system that's responsible for fight or flight, which means that when we experience that stress, so much of what we're experiencing is actually through the body, but we don't necessarily notice. And so many of us have been raised in a way where we're dissociating, we're ignoring, we're suppressing. So, we're not really paying attention. In fact, like, go away, right? I don't want to
Yeah.
deal with this. This feels uncomfortable. But it's actually when we start to learn how to work with it instead of against it, then shockingly enough, there's so much more flow and movement, and it's not so scary anymore. I actually have a client who is in a high conflict situation, and the words that he shared with me was, "It feels like my whole life has fallen apart." And I feel like I've lost everything. But in spite of that, because of this work, I've never been more peaceful and calm. And that's what becomes possible when you start to work with your body and the nervous system rather than against it. Is
Yeah.
that can happen.
Yeah, and I think people often turn to external sources or drinking or a lot of sex or something, shopping, to
Hmm.
try to calm that. And I think the work that you do is really helpful to people to find ways to do that without resorting to things that might not be so helpful. Let's talk a little bit about your book, Parenting Through Divorce. I know that it has really helped a lot of families. So tell me what inspired you to write it. I bet it has to do a little bit with your own journey
Yeah.
and what the core messages you hope that readers will take away from
Yeah. So I'll just quickly flash my book on screen. It looks like this.
it.
I only do that because I actually used to have a different cover, but it looks like this now. It's more reflective of my intention and the energy behind it. And I wrote the book for the same reasons I started this work, which is that not everyone can come and work with me. But the book makes it a lot more accessible in terms of meeting people where they are, whether they are in a remote place, time zone differences, or it's 2 a.m. and we've all been there staring at the ceiling at 2 a.m., stressing about the next thing. And this book can meet them there. And that's why I wrote the book, is to bring a lot of this wisdom and knowledge and practices into families, regardless of where they are, especially if they can't actually work with me. And I think that the most important thing that I want to share with families is that our ideology around divorce is there's something broken and you failed, and there's a lot of stigma around it. So I think the most foundational thing that I would want families to know is that you're not a failure. And even that language around it, I think we can shift, because it sounds like, well, that should be, and it should just be forever. It's like, oh, well, the vase fell on the floor and it broke and it shouldn't have happened. Well, it did. And rather, the way that I look at it is, what if there is a different way of looking at it? That it's not an alignment, it's not for us, and we've changed our minds, or something happened and we're making a change. And that feels so different. And so I think that's what would want people to take away is, you haven't failed. This happened. And it's almost like, from a societal perspective, when we see someone and their car has rolled off the side of the road, we would never expect that person to get back in their car and just get back on the highway and keep driving. And yet with divorce, like, it's gone off the road. But do you need help pushing it back up? Do you need a phone to call someone, right? And I think that's the second thing I would want people to walk away with is, it's okay to ask for help. This is a big deal. It's the hardest thing most people will have to go through in their lives. It's heavy, it's grief, it's loss, it's redefining. And as part of that loss, it's not just the marriage and the life as you know it, it's community. A lot of people lose their whole community and we don't talk about it. And it's identity, what you created over a long period of time. So all of that is in flux and it's uncomfortable, it's messy, it's hard, it's difficult. Of course, you would need help. So I think those are the two big things that I would want people to walk away with. And then a very fast third is that there's a different way. It doesn't have to be in the traditional way of, oh, divorce means it's like the big severing and it's argumentative, it's conflict, it's, litigation, that there's a different way to divorce where your family may change, but it doesn't have to break the family apart.
Yeah. And I think that like all of that goes together, of course, in our overall message, which is that even though divorce is hard and it's incredibly disruptive, it is common
Hmm.
and it happens and it's not a failing or a breaking. It's a natural evolution in some circumstances. Vivian, one of the things that I like to say to people, especially when they call me about prenuptial agreements, well, they're feeling really bad because it seems so cynical. And one thing I say to them is, listen, all marriages end either by death or divorce. And so this marriage will end, and you should expect that. And both of the ends of that, however it ends, will be painful. It
Hmm.
will be painful. And thinking and is not insane. But I don't want to take us off into a prenup conversation. I want to talk a little bit, but I want to take you back to something you said a little bit earlier about connection, right? Sort of like this sort of yearning that we all have for those secure connections. So can you talk a little bit about what that means and what that could look like for divorced or divorcing parents?
Absolutely. So I think at the heart of it, I focus so much on connection because especially in families, it's the ingredient that helps support you and your children in moving through the divorce. And so many of us have been brought up with this idea that love is all you need. You've got love.
Yes. Humming to
And I
myself, even I hear you say that, right?
yeah. And I'm going to say something really provocative and maybe even radical and say that's a myth. Love is not all you need. Love is important, but it's not the only ingredient. And if you want connection, there's actually another thing that you need, which is the prerequisite for love, and that's emotional safety. You can't have connection and the love will not land unless you have emotional safety. But most of us don't know how to even create emotional safety. We don't have it for ourselves. So I think at the heart of it, where I start with, and this is why this is such a foundation to all my work with my clients, I always start from this place, which is let's create emotional safety for ourselves first. Let's learn what that even feels like. So many of us don't even know what it feels like. We may not have experienced it growing up. We may not have experienced it even in our marriages, which is could be one of the reasons why it's where in the midst of a divorce. But certainly you cannot give what you don't have, whether that is love or compassion, like it works with a lot of things, but let's focus on safety. You can't give emotional safety if you have never experienced it and you don't know what it is. And most of us have not been taught. This is not something that's taught in schools. It's not taught in families. We take it for granted. We think about safety as food in the belly, warm home, here's a stuffy, right? But it's so much more than that. It's also emotional safety. It's feeling like I can express, I can show up as myself, I can feel that there's nothing wrong with that. And then when you have those things, then, oh, I can connect. And that connection's powerful. And I'll tell a very small story. I don't want to derail us too much, but I'll just tell a really small story, which is that there was a moment in time after I had moved out of the matrimonial home, my children are at high anxiety, that, and I had actually just lost my job. So I was going through major stress. I was like, the only thing that was the last thread that felt like is intact was this job, and I just lost it. So what am I going to do? I felt a lot of stress. And in that moment, my daughter was going through a lot of things, a lot of tantrums, and I lost it. I was just like, that is enough, right? And then off she goes, tears streaming down her face, door slams, and I could kind of see her because the wall is a window actually, and through the curtain, I could see her just kind of huddling on the floor. Instantly, I felt so bad that had happened, that I had not regulated myself, that I had, but at the same time, there's a lot of, well, compassion. Like, what am I actually going through? And what's really interesting is in that moment, I took some space, I gathered myself, grounded, and then I went and talked to her. And then we started sharing, and I did the repair, like apologized for what happened, leaned into what could be coming up for her. Like, were you afraid because mommy was angry? Or were you afraid that I loved you less because I was angry? And of course she was. So we addressed that. And then as we sat and we connected and she shared all these things that her tiny little 5-year-old self was experiencing and afraid of and anxious about. And I shared a little bit. I didn't say I lost my job, like obviously age appropriate, right? But it was like I had a really hard day and I got some news that was hard for mama. And I'm stressed too. And then she gave me a hug. She's like, "You're the best mama. You're doing such a good job." And I said, "You're the best, my baby angel. Like, I love you no matter what." And in that moment, nothing had changed for either of us. The circumstances were exactly the same, but everything got lighter. Our hearts were so full, and that's what connection is about. And I think this is important because connection and that bond, it's not about these big, grand gestures or these big moments, but rather it's in that those day-to-day ordinary moments of the repair of these threads. Like I often will explain it like it's like if you take a thread and you've connected it to your child, and then in these moments you just kind of keep connecting, and before you know it, you've got like a rope, and then like it kind of grows and grows and grows, and that's what creates these really deep bonds that are based on trust and based on mutual respect, and all of that lasts a lifetime. So anyway, I know I went on a little bit of a
Well, I think
digress
it's
there,
really,
but
Vivian, I think that like the key, and I'm sure all the listeners are thinking, wow, that is such a great story. And those are the moments, right, that we really remember, that like the really golden moments of parenting when we have that real connection with our child. And that's so much better than we did this thing, we went on this trip. Like that, what's great about those things in the trip is they have opportunity to connect with an experience, not just, well, I happen to be standing next to my kid when we saw the Grand Canyon or whatever, right?
yeah, yeah.
Exactly. All right, I want to remind people that I'm Catherine Miller, and you're listening to Divorce Dialogues. Divorce Dialogues is a podcast dedicated to educating people about divorce related topics so that everyone can divorce with dignity. Please subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen to podcasts to be sure that you don't miss an episode. And I'm talking today with Vivian Meraki about parenting through divorce and somatic coaching. And I think that since we are talking about these moments of connection and how wonderful they are as parents and as children, right, to have these moments of connection, so many parents worry about the long-term impact of divorce on their kids and worry about whether or not their kids are going to be okay or not okay. And from your perspective, what is it that you think helps kids stay or regain emotional resilience through that transition?
Yeah, I would think that's a great question. And what I would say is at the heart of it, it's about agency and self trust, that they trust themselves, that they will be okay. And what we don't think about is that the way we teach children self trust is actually by trusting them first. It starts with us because children actually look to us for validation for so many things. They're like sponges. What we model, they absorb. And also, they look to us and going, was that right? Like that was right, right, right. And so when we start to trust them, they start to learn it and it's built. So in my book, I talk about there's a whole chapter on self trust. And I talk about the building blocks of self trust, that it starts in the body. No surprise because I'm a somatic coach. So things like, you know, are you hungry? Are you feeling unwell? And the way that I do that is there are practices to kind of lean into, but how many times have we said, like, finish your plate? You can't be done. And this is no judgment because we mean well and we're just staring at it like, how can you possibly be full, right? Like you ate two macaronis. But like part of this is obviously it's a balance and every parent needs to use their best judgment. And I think every parent knows their child best. But my invitation is really looking at ourselves and like attuning with your child in understanding, like having the conversation with them about that trust and that they can trust their body and the cues that they're getting from their body. I've got a sore throat, for example. That's another common one. I'm sick. There are times when our children maybe like I don't want to go to school today. Oh, right? But that's a conversation and teaching them that I trust you and what's happening. and then coupling with other things. So I'll actually get out like the little pen light, I'll look in their throat, and like we have the conversation and all of those things. But there have been moments where there's been another caregiver in the room who's like, "Oh, you're fine. Let's go." And I look at them, I'm like, "Well, what's the evidence? Like you have been legitimately high fever and sick for 5, 6 days before. I can hear your raspy voice. I can hear your cough. You are telling me you have fatigue. Even though you were roughhousing with your dad yesterday, today you're not feeling well, and our body can change as well. I believe you." And when we start to believe them, they start believing that they're worth believing, because no child thinks and believes something someone tells them. And this kind of as they grow up too, right? Because we're not always there. There may be other people around that say things to them that maybe are hurtful and other things. Children don't believe what they're told because they think is true. Children believe it because they don't know that it's not true. And when we start to give them the compass to adjudicate for themselves and assess, how did that land? How did that feel? Does that feel true to me? And we're not talking about, I feel my body wants chips at 11 p.m. Like, that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about like that deeper knowing. So it starts in the body, and then it's emotional compass in terms of how we're feeling in our emotions, that they are also true, and that our emotions are signals for us, guideposts. So it's like, oh, don't cry, like that kind of thing. And then it goes into our decision making, and that our decisions are right and true for us. And what does that look and feel like? And then it goes into self actualization and purpose and walking a path that feels right for us. So, like, those are kind of the building blocks and the stages, but it all starts first in the body and then in our emotions.
Yeah, there's so much there. And Vivian, I want to remind people again that they're listening to the Divorce Dialogues podcast, and that the podcast has been educating people about divorce and relationship issues for over 10 years. And I want to give you the opportunity to have people find out more about you, find out about your book, or get in touch if they want to do that. So, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, so the best way is actually Instagram. I post frequently on Instagram. My handle is at Vivian Meraki, Vivian. Meraki is Meraki. I also will be posting longer form content on YouTube that explores these topics in a more deeper way. And then there's also my website, vivianmeraki.com.
Thank you. And the reason I wanted to do this, I really wanted to talk about the generational cycles, because as you're talking about a child not feeling well, I'm thinking to myself, when I was in the sixth grade, I pretended I was sick all of February except 2 days. And I think if my mother had said, and I would like hold the thermometer against a light bulb, and sometimes it would get too high, and I'd be like, "Oh no, no, I'm gonna have to go to the doctor now." And we're running it under the cold water. Anyway, I just wanted to have enough fever to stay home, but not to go to the doctor. And I think if she'd have asked me some of those questions that you're talking about, I would have probably just said, "I really just hate school."
Hmm.
I feel really sad there. I feel really isolated. And that would have been a whole other, it's not like she didn't know that, right? But if we could have talked about it, it might have been different. And I think that so many people, so many parents think, well, it was okay for me, so it's okay for my kid. But that's not necessarily true. So,
Hmm.
how can people do maybe better than their parents did with them and break what could be just a generational cycle of not as good as it could be ness?
Yeah, I would say that we have a perception that stoicism and strength is the ultimate outcome. But I would actually throw out there that a deep understanding and awareness of our emotional state, having that emotional intelligence, and being able to soften is actually stronger, because we grow up into people who then are astute in understanding what's for us, what's not. When we have any emotional spike, we're not necessarily reacting, and we're choosing how we want to respond. And we're able to moderate ourselves and go with and transition through, help to actively transition ourselves through the states that we want to transition through, if that makes sense. And we're not just like exploding, in the midst of conversations and relationships that we may be interacting with. And I think that what can also show up for people is also appeasement strategies, right? Like these survival mechanisms that we're fine because we learned these survival mechanisms. But at a certain point, we stop being fine, or we want more than fine. And I think that when we start to teach our children some of these things that we're talking about here today, we're already equipping them with the tools to start being much more than fine so much earlier. Like the things that it took us 30, 40, 50 years to learn, they're so much farther ahead because they've got it already. So I think that that is, I feel like what I want to hold is just so much compassion and love for our parents and how hard this work is. And nobody gets a child that comes with a manual on how to do this. And we didn't know what we didn't know. And we all turned out fine because look at us, right? We're functioning. But what if we can function with more joy, more love, more connection, more like I almost said faith, but that's not quite it. It's almost like um, alignment to our purpose in feeling that we are doing exactly what we're here to do. Like that is powerful. And I feel that when more people do that, communities shift and change.
Yeah. So we only have about 2 minutes left today. So for listeners who are like in the middle of divorce, right? And do you have like one mindset or practice that you think could help them shift their mindset and stay present and connected, particularly with their children while they go through the chaos of divorce?
The practice that I always lean on and recommend is something that I call the heart to heart. And it's a 10-minute connection ritual with your child. So, what I suggest is get rid of all the distractions, no screens for either people, and really dedicate 10 minutes per child to connect with them. And the objective is to get to know them and understand them. What was something beautiful that happened to you today? What made you curious? What surprised you? What was hard? If you could wave a magic wand and do anything right now, what would that be? Whatever those questions are for you, but really getting to know them. And that's what helps to build the connection. And it's that connection that will carry your family through divorce into a much, much more solid state later on. So I think that is, if I had to choose one practice, that one is very healing for everybody.
Well, I'm sure there's a lot more in your book and probably on your website and social media as well. So, Vivian Meraki, thank you so much for being my guest on Divorce Dialogues. It's been a really fascinating conversation.
Thank you so much. It's been my pleasure.